In a quiet neighborhood of the city, Jack lived with his wife, Aina. From the outside, their life looked ordinary and peaceful. Two working adults sharing a modest apartment, smiling politely at neighbors, attending family gatherings together. To anyone watching, they seemed like a normal married couple. But behind closed doors, something fragile was slowly breaking. Jack was a gentle and soft-spoken man. He worked long hours at a small accounting firm, earning just enough to manage their monthly expenses. He wasn't perfect, but he truly tried. Every evening he returned home carrying grocery bags, and sometimes a small bouquet of flowers. There was always a hopeful smile on his face, as if he believed that effort and patience could fix anything. But inside Ina's heart, a quiet emptiness had begun to grow. She had once been a girl full of dreams of traveling the world, living in luxury, being admired and envied. Slowly, she began comparing her simple life to the glamorous lifestyles she saw on social media and to the stories her friends told about their wealthy husbands. What began as mild disappointment gradually turned into resentment. At first, her complaints were small. "You never take me anywhere," she would say coldly. "We can plan something next month." Jack would reply gently, trying to keep peace. But next month was never good enough. One evening, after a minor argument about money, Ina crossed a line that would be impossible to erase. "You're useless," she shouted. "You don't even treat me like a wife. Sometimes I feel like you're hiding things from me." Jack stared at her in shock. "What am I hiding?" But Ina didn't answer directly. Instead, she began planting seeds of doubt. She started telling her family that Jack mentally tortured her, that he controlled her, that he shouted at her behind closed doors. None of it was true. In reality, Jack barely ever raised his voice. But words, once spoken, travel far. Phone calls began. Cousins sent angry messages. Neighbors started looking at Jack differently. He tried to explain himself, but he soon realized something painful. Dramatic lies are often more convincing than quiet truth. As weeks passed, the accusations grew more serious. Ina claimed that Jack had pushed her during an argument. She suggested that he restricted her freedom. She even implied that he might be involved with another woman. There was no proof because there was no truth behind it. But suspicion rarely needs proof to survive. One day, Ina went to her parents' house in tears. In a dramatic tone, she told them that Jack had threatened her. The house filled with anger and shouting. Relatives gathered, voices rose, and judgment filled the room. Jack was called there and made to stand in front of furious family members. "I have never even touched her," he said in a trembling voice. But no one listened in that moment. Jack understood a bitter reality. Sometimes innocence has no audience. That night, when they returned home, the apartment felt unfamiliar, cold, distant. Ina avoided his eyes. Jack stood in the living room, staring at their wedding photo hanging on the wall. "Why are you doing this?" he asked quietly. There was no answer. Perhaps pride had taken control. Perhaps admitting the truth had become too difficult. The next morning, Jack quietly took out a small suitcase. He folded his clothes carefully, without anger, without noise. He removed the anniversary wristwatch Ina had once gifted him and placed it gently on the table. Then he wrote a short note on a piece of paper. "I never harmed you, but I am tired of fighting shadows. I pray you find peace." He placed the keys beside the note and walked out of the home that once held all his hopes. Neighbors watched silently as he carried his suitcase to a taxi. No one stopped him. No one asked for his side of the story. Days turned into weeks. Without Jack's steady presence, reality slowly began to surface. Paying the rent became difficult. Bills started piling up, The attention Ina once received because of her accusations began to fade. People moved on to new topics. The noise disappeared, leaving only silence. One evening, while cleaning the apartment, Ina found the note again. She read it slowly. For the first time, doubt entered her heart, not about Jack, but about herself. She remembered his small acts of kindness, the late nights he worked, his patience, his quiet endurance. She realized that her false words had not only broken a marriage, they had shattered trust, dignity, and a man's peace. Meanwhile, Jack had moved to a small rented room in another part of the city. He lived quietly and focused on his work. The pain was still there, but so was a strange sense of relief. At least he was no longer living under constant suspicion. Months later, Ina finally gathered the courage to message him. "I think we need to talk." There was no anger in her words this time, only hesitation and regret. Jack read the message carefully. He did not reply immediately. He had learned something important. Love cannot survive where respect does not exist. And once false accusations stain a relationship, even forgiveness cannot completely erase the shadow. In the end, Jack chose distance, not out of hatred, but out of self-respect. And Ina was left standing in a silent apartment, carrying the heavy weight of her own words. Because sometimes, the loudest accusation leaves behind the deepest silence.